The government, its job is to preserve Swiss interests in the long run.
Yes.
And to mirror the will of the people.
Yes.
If you want to set up a company and you want to attract talents, quality of life, stability of it, security kind of thing, these are matters. These are relevant matters for people. Yeah. Quiet is not boring.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Getting Serious with Woody Wade. That's me, Woody Wade, and my guest today is Alexandre Edelmann, who is the head of Présence Suisse, or Presence Switzerland, which is an agency that has been set up within the Swiss government. He'll be telling us all about that in a moment, to basically cultivate Switzerland's image abroad. And maybe I should just turn it over to you, Alexandre, to tell us a little bit about the history, the background of this organization. I mean, why was it founded? Why was it established? Or why was it seen as a need? And how long has it been up and running? And what do you do?
How much time do you have? That's a good challenge. Well, thanks. Thank you very much for having me here today.
Pleasure. Thanks for coming.
Present Switzerland, so communication is not culturally the strongest part of DNA of Switzerland. Our country is we're a country of makers. We deliver first and then we talk about it. So there was kind of so it was not the culture of the government. So okay, we have to communicate abroad.
Okay.
There's a fear of bragging, and people are not bragging about that.
That's right.
We're very proud of being modest, and we keep that.
Okay.
At the end of so there was still nonetheless activities abroad, and there was some coordination between different agencies back in the days that were promoting Switzerland to be sure that at least we had a shared message.
Right.
And then at the end of the 90s, it started with a sad story. So there were some the Jewish assets in Swiss banks that hadn't been properly followed up, and then it came out that the Swiss banks didn't do all the due diligence. Especially it came from the US actually, where Switzerland was strong under pressure.
I remember that.
Criticized about these assets, and so then it is what it took to make the politicians decide that we needed, because the image of Switzerland was so under pressure, it was at risk for Switzerland, also business-wise.
Sure.
And there were some discussions about boycotting Switzerland in the US, especially on the East Coast.
Right.
So then you say, okay, we need to explain better what happened, because many things that have been said, not hiding the fact that certainly the due diligence hadn't been done.
Yes.
And homework said to be done, so it has legal follow-up and so on.
Right.
But nonetheless, over the noise it generated, some parts were not true or accurate.
I'm sure that's
so. It showed at the time the need for Switzerland to be the one communicating about itself.
right.
So this is how it started. The different layers in the history, but since 2008, President Switzerland is part of the Swiss Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and but working with all departments and also with private and public actors on different levels of Switzerland, and we are coordinating the international communication strategy of Switzerland abroad.
So it's gone from defensive to proactive, basically.
It's always a mix of things. So we do indeed inform, and there's the law plus a 4-year strategy that is defined. So the law has been voted by the parliament, and the 4-year strategy is defined by the Swiss government.
Right.
So the long run is defined by the law, and it's a mix of broad audience and decision takers, taking care of networks, developing networks that are useful for Switzerland, generating sympathy to the country, which is a lovely sentence in the law. It's a pretty rare one, but it's saying it's not having a good image for having a good image. It's important to have a good image in order to support positive decisions to the country.
Okay.
Let it be business-wise, political-wise, diplomatic-wise, science-wise, and so on.
So
a good image, we're in the field of perception.
Right.
A good perception has very concrete consequences. It be positive or negative for the country.
Sure. Well, I mean, as an ex-marketing man myself, I mean, what you're describing sounds very much just like a brand, right?
It is, and we have one of the strongest brands in the world. As a country perspective, and many studies are showing it, not only from us, but this is one of the strongest brands. I mean, when you think about it, we're a country with less than 10 million inhabitants,
Right.
about 9,040,000, I think this is the numbers that have been published earlier this week,
Right.
that basically we less than 10 million inhabitants. We are, if you look at the numbers, a G20 country.
Yeah.
We're not part of the G country. We are associated to many meetings, but if you look from a GDP perspective, we would be G20.
Right.
Less than 10 million inhabitants.
Yes, right.
We are the world leaders in the field of innovation. You have great R&D centers for international companies coming here.
Yeah.
We have leading universities. So it's not about bragging about it, but there is something about Switzerland that makes the brand very strong. And you go anywhere in the world, if you show a Swiss flag, my son is 3 years and 2.5 months, whatever, but he's playing with the flag. So we're looking at the flags, and he says which country is which. If you do the same game anywhere in the world, not with kids, I guess, but if you take the flags, I think Switzerland is one of the very well-known,
the most
flag.
recognizable
Not
flag.
only because we are an exception, we are the two only countries with Vatican to have a square flags, not a
Yes,
rectangular one.
right. Yeah.
But independent from that, it's a brand as such. It's a plus.
Right.
You have the red and white effect. So people are knowing this.
Yeah.
In Japan, sometimes it looks like a hospital because in Japan they have, it's the same, it's like a Swiss flag for hospitals. But nonetheless, the flag is very strong. The Swiss made effect is very strong.
Right.
And if you go anywhere in the world, if you say you're coming from Switzerland,
Yeah.
Never ever it happened to me that someone asked me, where?
Yeah, right.
So there is something very
Right.
strongly. Of course, we're not the US, we're not France, the UK, and China, if we're talking
Right.
about the leagues. But for the country, the brand is very strong. So indeed, we are the brand agency of the country,
Right.
knowing that the biggest part of the brand is not made by us. It's made by Swiss brands,
Sure.
companies.
Sure.
It's made. I mean, Roger Federer has a slightly bigger impact on Swiss perception that I have, and I will never have. So we're more working with.
Working at it.
Hey, it's good. He's a good partner for us.
Right. Sure.
Because he incarnated some very strong Swiss values.
Yeah.
But modesty, quality, delivering, elegance, that kind of
Right.
thing. So the image of the country, we are not mastering the image of the country. We're measuring it, and we try to take some marketing, like communication activities in
Right.
order to mirror the needs we have for the
Yeah.
image. But the image is made of many, many different
Sure.
factors.
Sure. And these things are all outside your control, and yet you still have to kind of synthesize somehow. I mean, if you could distill the essence of Swissness down to just 2 or 3 words, I don't know if you've ever been asked to do that before. I mean, what are
On a
you
daily
mentioned-
basis.
on a day, right? So what are the ones you mentioned? Innovation, for example, a moment ago. What are the other things that you think? I mean, there are things that you want to promote about Switzerland, but what do you think are the key words that people think about Switzerland outside the country?
So there are different things. There's who are we and how are we perceived? So on the who are we, I think if we're talking about USP, there is something interesting about Switzerland. It works.
Mm-hmm.
It's something,
Right.
it sounds
Right.
pretty obvious, but it's not that obvious.
No, it isn't.
You know,
Especially
it
if
works.
you've been to some places where things don't work so well.
We are very solutions oriented. We're not a dogmatical country. And I think everything I say is not against the other countries, because
Right.
you also need countries with strong vision, with philosophical approach,
Right.
that kind of thing. We are a country originally of farmers.
Yeah.
So we need things to work. We
Yeah.
don't have resources. We cannot waste them.
Right.
So natural resources. So we've been investing in making things work.
Right.
Because I wouldn't say we have one shot, but nonetheless, we are really focusing. It's designed to solution. And we do what it takes, in the sense that also we don't think we have the answer from the beginning.
Right.
We have a challenge or a problem, and we have to find the solutions. And we are very well aware, maybe because we're coming from the mountains. Sometimes in the mountains, the path you planned is suddenly blocked.
Right.
So you have to find another one.
Right.
And not saying, okay, this is where I plan to go, I have to go through. Sometimes you just have to acknowledge that even if you plan it well, it doesn't work. So
Right.
you have to adapt yourself. So we're very adaptating.
Right.
And we don't really understand each other because we have so many national languages that we use.
don't understand each other?
Yeah.
You think?
Absolutely. So we stick to the core of the discussion. The fact that we have, it's kind of provocation, but we know that you have German-speaking or Swiss German-speaking people working with French-speaking, with Italian-speaking, with Roman-speaking.
Right.
And we're in the middle of Europe.
Right.
So we have people coming from all over Europe.
What you mean?
So in that sense, we stick, again, always coming back to solution. We know that, first of all, we're not always agreeing because you're a different cultural aspect.
Right.
It's not because we disagree and we should stop talking.
Right.
I think generally it's good to still talk also with people you disagree with. It makes you more clever. And in the current world, I think it's useless not to forget that disagreeing doesn't mean we shouldn't talk together. It means we should sometimes compromise. And that very Swiss aspect is, okay, I don't have the solution on my own. I work with others. Sometimes people are making fun of Swiss people being slow. We're not slow. We're listening to each other, and we're trying to take the needed time to define. We know it takes less time to think properly and then to make than to start making without thinking about it. And then saying it was not ready, not a good approach. So I think we have kind of a mix. So from the USP, it's not having a dogma allows us to have different people, different perspectives at the table. Right. It'd be in the field of innovation, designers, searchers, business people. Right. Everybody coming with its own perspective. Yeah. And then teaming up in order to find a solution. And that's, and I think this is pretty rare to have that. Yes. And also we are condemned due to the situation of the country. Going back of today is not only of the history. We have very high cost. Yes. Right. Actually, we're not expensive. It's just value per proposition. Okay. In that sense, of course, I'm paid to say that it's not expensive. But the fact is, if you want something cheap, don't come to Switzerland. Right. Because there are many other countries that have different structures that allow them to have cheaper product. So we have to be the best ones. Right. Because there is no alternative for Switzerland but to be the best quality, the most trustful one, and so on. Right. Due to the cost we have. So it makes things, it has to work, because if it doesn't work and you paid for it, it doesn't work. If you have something very cheap, you cannot complain about having issues. With Switzerland, it has to be good and excellent, because if not, clients would go to another country. So this is something, this is, it's a challenge of the country, and we have to keep that level.
So if I hear what you're saying just in the last couple of minutes, we're talking about a certain deliberateness in the approach that Switzerland takes to working and to solving problems, right? It's not just shooting from the hip. It's studying a situation, but at the same time, there's this collaboration or a very open feeling towards collaborating, sometimes with people who don't speak the same language. They might be from 4 villages over or something like that, but they already speak a different language there. And that's something that has basically shaped Switzerland for centuries, right?
And you have also talents. I think if you're talented, I wouldn't compare it to the American dream, but there is something, if you're a hard worker and you have skills, I think you have many, many foreigners that are into Switzerland that make massive careers.
Exactly.
And I think there is something very open also.
Right. The appreciation for ability, right? Yeah.
It's not an ego. I mean, you look at Swiss companies, you have to the top management people from different origins, for different background, different countries. As long as it works. With a country, it has to work. If we do not deliver, then suddenly the discussion is changing a bit.
Okay. All right.
So it's kind of it's a pressure. It's a good pressure. It's a positive one. To deliver.
So you've got also high cost, but basically we're going to rebrand that as value. You've got talent. You've got all these kind of key words. So how do you ensure that the world understands Switzerland this way? I mean, you and I can have this discussion here, and I've lived here a long time, and I know that you speak the truth, right? And I get it. But someone who is outside the country, who knows just that the flag of Switzerland is this big white plus, and otherwise it's all about watches and banks and cheese and chocolate and the kind of stereotypical stuff. How do you get that message across about what Switzerland stands for? Especially if the idea is that ultimately these people, it's not just about changing their perception, but it's actually maybe moving them a step closer towards a decision to invest here or to come here to set up a business. It's not just that you want to, change hearts and minds. I mean, that's important. That's a good thing to do.
First step.
But it's the first step in something that would be more pragmatic.
Yeah.
Down the
It's
line.
first of all, what you mentioned, the clichés, they're positive. It's right. We can build on that.
Right.
And if you look at it, if you take just watches, people, I mean, obviously there are some smartphones that gives a more accurate time.
Right.
And it even change when you're traveling. Every time you start your smartphone or you connect it, you are adapted to the summertime or to the winter time.
I know.
Or you land in Japan and you know exactly
It makes you
Japan.
so lazy.
So on some aspects, it's I wouldn't say it's better, but it's more practical than a Swiss watch. And I was this week at the big watch fair in Geneva, Watches and Readers.
Right.
Very impressive to see how many people are traveling from all over the world to look at Swiss watches.
Yeah.
So it's different. So it's not only the decision for watches is not made only on the fact that it's the more accurate time ever.
Sure.
It's mechanical, it's quality, it's statutory too.
Yeah.
It's a mix of different things.
It says something about you.
It says something about taking the time when you travel and you have to do it yourself. It also allows you to have a better understanding of the fact that you've been traveling. So from mindset perspective, I don't want to be too romantic or too altmodisch, as we say in German, old-fashioned, but nonetheless, there is something fascinating about the time going. We're very aware of the time.
Right.
But if you take watches, people are willing to pay more money for a Swiss watch than for any other watches in the world.
Right.
There are other countries producing watches.
Right.
By the way, Swiss watch industry is fascinating because it was born due on foreign political decisions. I mean, the first one that's really set up the watch industry in Switzerland were Brits and French that left the country and came to Switzerland. So in that perspective, it says a lot about the history of the country.
They came here because of the...
Also, if you take the French, it's the same as for the bank.
Precision...
No. They came, the French, for instance, they came the Huguenots when Louis XIV made the Révocation de l'Édit de Nantes.
Right.
Interestingly, so 17th century.
Yeah.
A king in France said that people had to convert to Catholicism or to left the country.
Right, and they did leave.
And some of them left.
Yeah.
And they came to Geneva, they came to Neuchâtel and so on.
Yes.
And this is where you find the first watchmakers.
Oh,
there was already something, but
I didn't know this.
The first private bank in Geneva has been founded, also they came from France. And if you take Rolex, one of the biggest Swiss watch brand, it has been founded by a Brit. So in that sense, it says a lot. And you're even looking back centuries ago, there's something there. And so we have these watches.
Yeah.
They work because they're Swiss, because people are trusting the country.
Right.
So if you buy a Swiss watch, you trust the quality.
Yeah.
You trust the fact that you get good value for money.
Right.
And you trust the results of the timekeeping more than other countries.
Right.
The Olympics, they're working with a Swiss watch company.
Swiss timing.
And Swiss timing there.
Itself, right?
And if it wasn't Swiss, the results of some competition, talking about perception, not about the fact, but the perception is, as it's Swiss, people trust the results.
Right.
So these cliches, and I could do that also with cheese, chocolate, and so on.
Right.
All these cliches, they are positive one for Switzerland. So my job is not to erase them. My job is okay, you like Switzerland for that, keep on liking Switzerland for that, but did you know that on top of it we have, and then we start showcasing what we have.
Yes.
And if you look at it, there are some great, also, first of all, you took universities, ETH Zurich, we're in Lausanne today, also very good school, ETH Zurich, slightly older, and is even high on the rankings, leading university in the world.
It's in the top 10, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
For IT is 8, I think, depending on the categories.
Not bad for a small country like Switzerland, right?
APFL in Lausanne is the same. Also, when you look at it, it's about a 2 hours train ride between the two technical schools.
Right.
The Swiss MIT, sometimes they say.
Right.
Where in the world do you have such... Also, it's like Boston. Look at Switzerland like a city.
Right.
Look at all the universities, the ecosystem. You have the best design school in Lausanne, which is one of the top 3 in Europe, at least, they call.
Right.
You have Lausanne and Zurich with both ETH. You have Geneva University, is also very highly ranked. You look at the Nobel Prizes per capita. Switzerland is almost the highest density of it. It's incredibly busy in Switzerland if you take the territory, knowing that a big part of it is with mountains where nobody lives. So the density of Switzerland from Geneva to Zurich and Lucerne and St. Gallen, there's really a very, very, the intensity of the ecosystems of innovation, culture and so on is really, it's a very busy place, but at the same time very quiet. And I think this is how we communicate.
Quiet?
Yes, quality of life is crazy. It's not when you walk. This morning I walked through Lausanne, charming village. They don't like when I say village.
No, I wouldn't imagine.
But on the world scale, if you talk to someone coming from Mexico or Japan or Tokyo, and you say I'm living in Lausanne, for them it's not even a neighborhood. Which is not that important because even if you live in Tokyo or Mexico, at the end of the day, there is only a certain amount of people you can meet a day. So even if you live in a 20 million inhabitant city, you're not meeting 20 million people a day. So at the end, we're all humans, so the scale is not that important. But it's quiet in the sense that when you walk through Lausanne or even Zurich is a world city. When you walk there, you're not feeling under pressure. You can walk, you can see the lake and the mountains. Almost everywhere you're in Switzerland, you can see a mountain, you can see a river, that kind of stuff. So it's a mix. Coming back after a long run, but to your question about what do we want to position abroad, this is, so we want not strengthening the cliché, but keeping them alive because it's part of our identity. And then using them, the quality of life, the peacefulness of Switzerland, stability of Switzerland, and then to say, by the way, we are also innovative. So we have our communication activities must mirror the needs we have in the field of innovation. We need people to see us as we are. So we have to strengthen the perception of Switzerland in the field of innovation because it will increase the opportunities for Swiss companies in the field of innovation, which is a pretty broad one. The perception should allow them to export more. And the perception should allow them to find investors easy to take startups. So all of that, the perception plays their important role.
So this is, I mean, again, trying to distill all of these things you're saying. There's this quiet confidence, the peacefulness, obviously. Neutrality is an issue there at the higher level. Talk about that in a minute. But, and for example, here in Lausanne, there's even something that's been established recently called the Trust Valley. So this is a recognition of the importance of this mindset, Exactly. So it's interesting. I mean, how do you measure these things? I mean, is there a way to actually see the evolution of the perception of the country over time? You do surveys or
So we do
focus groups, or how does that work?
We do every 2 years. We run surveys in 20 countries, 20 countries in the world, mainly neighbors. So neighbors, US, Mexico, Japan, China, so in the key markets, South Africa too, and some other ones. And there we measure to the broad audience the perception of the country.
Who are you asking? Business people?
So no, these surveys made on a broad scale. So, and then there are surveys not run by us, but you have, for instance, the Nation Brand Index or the Brand Finance Soft Power Index, or different studies run by others that measures the perception of the countries. Usually, the broad audience is the easiest. One of the challenges to have, it's very difficult to have quantitative surveys with decision makers. Because if you're a CEO, usually you're not answering the phone at 6 p.m. and say, of course, I have 20 minutes to answer your questions. This is not happening so much. But for the more qualitative experience, we do have focus groups. We have all Swiss embassies worldwide meeting on a daily business people. But it's more challenging to have an accurate and science-based studies about the perception to decision. It's more qualitative. And the third aspect is the media coverage. So we're looking at the media coverage worldwide. So we're not covering all the media worldwide, but there's about 200 to 250 leading media worldwide. We measure them on a permanent mark. We have weekly analysis of how Switzerland is perceived in the media. What I can say is we have a very positive image to the populations. It's more critical when you go to neighbor countries. But like for anything else, if you know the better, you also see the dark side of it. So the image of Switzerland is much better in Asia. So much. It's better in Asia. It's still good, but not as good in Europe. that they know us better.
Right.
Would be the same for each and every country.
Sure.
Of course, but it's the same. If you ask someone in Switzerland about Japan,
Right.
they have more clichés than about France.
Sure. Of course.
It's part of the deal. So it's nothing specific about Switzerland.
Right.
What is specific, we have on the Nation Brain Index, which measure different dimensions of the perception of a country, that it be institutions, business opportunities, cultural legacy, and so on. There's 6 different elements that it measures. We are in the top 8. So we're number 8. If we were 6, I would have said top 6.
Right.
Yeah, usually when somebody says we're in the top 8, it doesn't mean that you're second.
Right.
But we are under ranking on these different dimensions. And again, a country with less than 10 million inhabitants.
Right.
All the competitors, you have France, Japan, Germany, US, so you have the usual suspects that are there.
Right.
But we are the highest in the ranking as a medium-sized country. And if you compare to the Netherlands or to Sweden, or some other competitors that are playing the same league, we're number 1, not only from GDP, but also in the perception.
Right.
And it's a very stable one. It's even better this year. So we might be in the top 4.
Wow.
So it means 4.
Okay.
But differences are not massive. But nonetheless, what is important, of course, if we're number 1, we say number 1. It's not the case. But we're in the worldwide association, the leading countries in the field of perception. We are lower in the field of culture, which is unfair to the great quality of culture we have in Switzerland. But competitors, if you look at Rome, when you walk through Rome, you walk through history.
Right.
So there is something, when you talk about France, when you have Versailles, Tour Eiffel, and Notre Dame, of course, it's not the field where we are. I mean, you have to look at competitors, so we cannot be everywhere very good.
Right.
We're number 1 in the field of stability, political system, that kind of things. We're very high also in open business, for the business easily. We are a little bit lower sometimes in friendliness, because it takes sometimes to get close to break through. It's something you know about that, and it has to be. It comes sometimes. If you everywhere number 1, I don't see how it will work, because you cannot be very stable, and a bit conservative in stability, and at the same time be
total outgoing.
So it's a mix of different things, but at the end of it, we can say that we are coming back to the brand, but we have very strong perception, where we have improvement potential in the field of innovation, because we are the most innovative country in the world. Again, depending on
that's ranked number 1 for sure. I think
in the last 14 years, it's made by it's patent based. So we are the country, because it's very difficult to measure innovation.
Yes, right.
And defining innovation, if you talk to scientists, they will say innovation is the exact moment where you go from research to the market. If you talk to politicians, innovation is the full bandwidth from research to the market.
Right.
But the exact definition for scientists is a bit more precise.
And measurable.
Yeah, measurable. And the patent is the best indicator to measure that.
Right.
And so we have the highest number of patents per capita. But so on a global scale, we have very high number of patents. So this study shows that we are generating innovation in the field R&D, deliverable to the market. Switzerland is very strong at it. So it's a fact. And our job is to come from the pack. And there is nothing I can do about innovation in Switzerland. I would love to. My father was an engineer, but I must say I'm pretty limited in what I can do myself in that field. But keeping people aware that this innovation is happening in Switzerland, this is a key element of our mission.
But it's not, your job and your colleagues, it's not about actually changing those things. It's about making sure people know about them.
Exactly.
So it's all about...
So it's really, take an example. We're running a campaign that's called SwissTech. This is
SwissTech?
SwissTech. Yeah, we've been very, very good in the brainstorming. We wanted to talk about tech and Switzerland. So we've been spending a lot of minutes to say, how could we make it readable? And we got pretty quickly to SwissTech. But it's very difficult because you have French tech, you have Japan tech. But it's a no-brainer. Basically, it's Swiss, it's tech, it's SwissTech. Which is a great achievement because we're working with different organizations, and this is one brand, SwissTech, where you have trade office, where you have innovation agency, where you have the Swissness network, where you have present Switzerland. So we all team up together to target the decision takers and shapers in the field of innovation with a specific focus on startups. So we go where they are. We attend the CS in Las Vegas, GGBa in Paris, Lush in Helsinki. So that's kind of very B2B events where we showcase Swiss innovation. And when I have to explain our job, our part of the job is if you have an investor coming to a fair and he has 2 hours, it's all about resources allocation. He has 2 hours. How, by using the right communications measure, we put Switzerland on his list. He has 2 hours. How do we make him come to the SwissTech booth for 10 minutes?
Okay.
Then what's happening on the booth doesn't belong to us anymore. Startup has to be good. Business people has to do the job. But we're really working on that moment. He enters the fair. And he has to see the logo. Okay, there's SwissTech. We have to be seen. So we have to be marketing relevant and to use the right techniques to be seen. And we need him to come to the booth. So this is really the job of Present Switzerland, creating opportunities based on marketing measures in order to maximize.
But you're starting that process, I mean, before the person comes to
we work in that, we work on the PR side. It's a long run.
It
has to be pertinent on the day, but it's a long run. How do we make sure to be on the list ahead of the fair? How do we choose the fair with the relevant people? So it's a mix of many things. But at the end of the day is how do we get his or her attention to visit or to meet with Swiss companies, Swiss startups. This is what we do. It sounds very easy in a very competitive and a very noisy things. It's not easy. So it's kind of a dream. It's fascinating. And other countries are doing it too. So you have to define a USP. You have to be different. It's not that easy in the field of innovation, but saying we're very innovative. Every country, I don't know any country saying we are the lower in the field of innovation. We are the lowest ever. So usually people come and say, we're innovative. So how do we place Switzerland? And sometimes people are coming for chocolate and cheese, going back to clichés, and are staying for innovation. So this is how the mechanism works. We want people to, we do what it takes to bring the right people. And then it belongs to the next step. Are the people, the startup.
How many of these events are there around the world each year?
That we do. So we have 3 main events, the 3 I mentioned. So Las Vegas, Helsinki, and Paris. So CS, Slush, and VivaTech are the main platforms we're doing. Embassies are running also. SwissTech label event. Swissness is running some. We have one in the Web Summit in Rio, which is a franchise from the Web Summit from Lisbon that went overseas to Rio. It's produced by Swissness team there. We co-finance it with the Center for Innovation. We have one present as SushiTech in Japan.
SushiTech.
It's clichés, but it's a good example. Japanese made a new startup fair. They name it SushiTech.
It's not about sushi, but that's the name, right?
It's just Japanese. So we all doing the same. Japanese people say, okay, what is very well known about Japan? Sushi. We take tech, SushiTech, it works well. So it's so just say we're not the only one thing about it, but it's a massive startup event in Japan. And we also attending there. So the Swissness in Japan is producing there, but using the SwissTech brand. There are also another company producing a booth at GITEX in Dubai that is branded SwissTech. So they're the one we run ourselves, and then they are the one run by other, but that we support financially and design-wise in order to have that SwissTech.
So it sounds like at some point in the calendar, there's always something going on, right?
There is, fortunately, or unfortunately, depending if you ask the families. But it's always, and the good thing is not fully. So we build up SwissTech. It's an initiative that came from Present Switzerland, but it shows us it doesn't make any sense if we do it on our own. Switzerland is a very decentralized country, so there are different organizations. So the success of it is that we all agreed to hide the logos and to work all with the same one. Which is on a Swiss level a decent result.
I think so.
It says something about that. But everybody was convinced that it was the right thing to do. And then again, to define where to go is not on Present Switzerland to define what is the most relevant fair for a Swiss startup. So in a Swiss, which is the innovation agency of Switzerland, they have surveys to the Swiss startups asking them what are the most relevant events. And based on the results of this survey, then we say, okay, this is useful for startups. This is good for business. And this has a potential impact for the perception. If we have these dimensions, VivaTech is a good example, happening in Paris in June. This is where it's one of the major European startup event. And then we go there because for Swiss startups, the costs are pretty low. Traveling to Paris is easy. Traveling to Vegas, there's another challenge. Traveling to Paris is pretty low. Very accessible. You go by train. You spend 3 days there. You have all investors for Europe and from abroad, also from the US or Asia. It's okay, there we're useful. This is a bit how we work.
Yeah, interesting. It sounds like there's a lot of coordination that goes on, right? That has to, because you're talking about InnoSwiss, SwissTech, Swissness, Presence Suisse,
Switzerland Global Enterprise, and sometimes we work with GGBa and with GZA and with Basel area. This is crazy how many of these organizations we have in Switzerland.
Yeah. And so you got to a little bit juggle the activities, or how to...
It's again, if the why is clear, this is my obsession. My team is tired of me asking always, why do we do things? If the why is clear, then people can agree on. If you need people to agree on why we're doing things, it's like in business. And too often it starts with it should be blue or red. So you have very cool design discussions. Without starting with why do we do things. What we do is less important. If the why is clear, then you have people doing the job.
Simon Sinek way of doing things, right?
So if the why is clear, then coordination is easier. The worst thing is if you spend 90% of your time coordinating, you're not doing. And we are doers. So we need, but if you only do without coordination, the risk is pretty high not to deliver the right product because it wouldn't mirror the needs of the country. So we have to make sure it's part of the why definition. Why we do things that are useful for the country. So we have to talk to the different partners, let it be private or public, to be sure that what we do is aligned with the needs. One is defined, then we go. So it's a balance to find between having 25 meetings a day and doing stuff. If you have no coordination, it's a risk. If you have too much coordination, you're not doing. So it's a balance to be found. But these people are very good and agile at doing it because we're used to it.
It goes back to this whole idea of collaboration, reaching out to the people that you meet who might have a slightly different viewpoint. But that doesn't matter because at the end of the day, we are both trying to achieve the same thing, right?
And again, if the why is clear, this is the key moment. Sometimes it doesn't work and you make a project and say, was it good or not? You cannot even say if it was good or not. Because how can you measure success if you haven't defined the right goals? So you can have 1 million visitors. If none of them is investor and your target and your purpose is to bring investors to something, you have 1 million visitors, but useless. Sometimes it's better to have the 2 right people at the table than 1 million. On the other hand, if you're talking about the expo in Osaka, where we run the Swiss pavilion that is about to open, there we want 1 million visitors to come to the Swiss pavilion. Because
1 million?
In
how much time?
6 months.
In 6 months.
We had 1.8.
Not in one afternoon.
No, we had 1.8 million in Dubai, for instance, for the last World Expo.
Really?
Because our job is to be at the right place and to be sure that the pavilion is this is location. So we can almost retail elements. So there, if we want to have as many people as possible, not as many, but nonetheless, it's a quantitative aspect in Osaka, where we have a great show about innovation, exhibition about it, but we need to have a certain volume. This explains why we spend money there in the World Expo. In the past, it's been pretty successful. I hope that it goes on. But I think the image of Switzerland and Japan is good. So people are willing to come to Swiss Pavilion. And then we have a mix of Heidi, who's a Swiss icon in Japan, because of thanks to the manga. So the 70s manga is still very, very popular in Japan. So we work with Heidi. And we bought
there's a manga Heidi?
Oh gosh, there are many things you have to catch up, my friend.
I guess so.
It's a legendary one. Worldwide, very strong in Japan, and still today, very, very strong in Japan, based on the Heidi.
On the traditional Heidi
novel,
Wow.
And so we're working with that because for Japanese people, Switzerland is Heidi. So they're coming to make a picture with Heidi. In the meantime, on the way within the pavilion, they learn about the Swiss recipe, about innovation, and so on. Then they discover concrete projects. We had more than 200 application project that wanted, so applying project that wanted to be showcased within the pavilion. We showcased 30 of them over the 6 months. And then so they go through the pavilion, they see the history of Switzerland, then they have an immersive moment, an Instagram moment, because this is the deal. Then it goes through an innovation exhibition, and they left by saying goodbye to Heidi.
Oh, okay.
And this is actually the marketing mix we do. And there, our target is about 1 million visitors over 6 months that going through the pavilion. Plus we have a B2B aspect where we have panels, smaller scale with 50 people for each panel discussing about, we have the top universities from Sweden coming with Japanese universities opening up, and we have more panels or workshop. We have 50 people. And they are exactly as important as the 1 million visitor we expect.
Sure, of course.
So in that sense, the targeting is key. If the why is key, again, what we do on the ground floor, it's made to have a broad audience, media coverage. NHK, national television, has been already making lots of coverage. But then we have 12 pages in Wired, the Japanese edition, this month about quantum computing, because we invited them to Switzerland, to Geneva, to the CERN, and to the OQI. So you have that. And the Wired USA online is also using the content that has been produced with the Japanese Wired about quantum computing. So this is a bit, again, the mix, always the same. Wired is not read by the broad audience.
No, I wouldn't think.
It's perfectly fine. So we do have NHK covering for the broad audience. When you have 3 minutes on the news in Japan, talking about millions watching it and the Swiss pavilion, with Heidi and the fact that the pavilion is innovative. And then you have Wired, we have no Heidi, but you have the CERN showcase, the leading innovation newspaper in Japan or in the US. This is a bit how we work.
Well, it makes sense because you couldn't actually, I could hardly imagine combining CERN and Heidi, I guess you could do it.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, if you do it right. I had a boss a long time ago who always prefaced any discussion about a project as, how will we know afterwards that it was a success? And, you have to think, we're so used to just doing these things, but you need to think, maybe what we're doing is actually not the best choice, right? If our goal is to get 1 million visitors, or 20 million, or 5 million, whatever the number is, but it could also be that there are other goals, and so there are other ways that it would measure success depending on the event, but also even the one event could have 5 different goals, right? And
I said the expected impact, we form it in the way, die erwartete Wirkung, as we say in German. So the expected impact is really defined with the teams. I say, to me, the success would be, in the communication briefing, will be okay. If we want to be on the front, so to me, a success, depending on the topic, but it might be for us, if in the front page of DFT, so the Financial Times, this is kind of a relevant metric. Not for Osaka, but for other topics. So if we have Swiss innovation front page of FT, that would be a key metric.
Absolutely.
How do we get there?
Yeah.
And we have to start with it, and not with blue or red. If it takes something to be blue to be on the front page of FT, then we make it blue. And then if you take an event, then we produce the event. But it's the same. SwissTech, everything we do, this is the keys. Okay, what would be the perfect impact or the good impact for that? And depending on the topic, we're also working a lot on trust. We're talking about multilateralism, Geneva, and so on. Depending on the topic, the how, what we do is very different.
Sure.
Our job is to clearly define the expected impact, and then we can build on that to define what should we do. And too often, not only in present business, or everywhere in any company, as you say, sometimes you work on things, and you think it's good, good, but you just have forgotten the key element of why we do it, what should it give. So always coming back to
what we're aiming to achieve, right?
And this is kind of a challenge we have. And going back to coordination, we shouldn't lose ourselves into too much coordination, in the sense that, but we have to agree on the expected impact. What would be for all of us? What is the goal we could all agree on? And we're doing things very almost at school. So we sometimes coming back to define what is your goal, and then we take goals for different organizations and partner. And they say, okay, these are the different goals. Do we have a match or not? And there are some projects we're not running.
Right.
because and for good reasons, we do not agree on the goals. Because sometimes when you're from different organizations, you have no overlap.
Right.
So, okay, let's do it on our own.
It
has to be an added value to work together.
Sure.
Forcing collaboration, if it's used as very well,
terrible.
it's worse.
Yeah.
It generates frustration.
Right.
It's used as it's more expensive.
Right.
If you have 5 people working on a project that would have been done by one, do it with one.
Yeah.
So in that sense, is really what we're working on is, again, also resource allocations. We only go together where it's a common added value.
Yeah. Right. Makes sense. Let me change gear for just a minute. I mean, and what are the biggest challenges to brand Switzerland?
It's a good question on a Friday morning, 2 days after the Liberation Day. Thank you so much. I don't know if it's going to be on air, but also a challenge. It's a challenge for everyone. We're in a geopolitical moment of redefinition. And
redefinition?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not commenting politically, but obviously rules are changing. There was a moment after from 1989, after the Berlin Wall went down, where, so it has never been as stable or easy as sometimes we say when you look back 40 years or 30 years ago.
Sure.
But nonetheless, there was something where there were shared rules, clear definition, the WTO momentum, where we agree about rules, a framework.
Right.
And that framework is under pressure.
Yes.
For good and bad reasons.
Right.
So things are different. I'm really not commenting politically. I'm just looking at it and, of course, redefining how a country should communicate in a much more unstable moment.
Yes.
Which doesn't say it won't be stable again.
Right.
Which doesn't say it's bad or good. It's just saying that today
it's different.
You don't know.
Yeah.
When you look at all countries, how they reacted to the speech of the U.S. president.
Right.
People are unsure.
Yeah.
Which is very un-Swiss.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
And of course, and then you have business people saying it brings opportunities because in everything you have opportunities. The other ones say, hey, what do I do if you are an SME in Switzerland exporting a lot to the US today? Not the easiest day.
Right.
You don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
So, which is, again, not...
But is that a challenge for you to try to tackle in some way?
Yeah, because defining the needs, going back to why do we do things, what is the expected impact, the context plays a major role. So the context is changing a lot. So you have different countries reacting very differently.
Yes.
It's a political decision how to react.
Right.
And then you have pressure from the companies. It's a mix of many, many things.
Yeah.
So we need to be sure that what we do is consistent with political decisions, with Swiss needs, and defining Swiss needs nowadays.
Right.
Not that easy.
Yes.
So in that sense, the coordination needs are much higher now than they used to be because it's a moving environment.
Yeah.
So this is the biggest challenge. Also, of course, we have the usual challenge of building up trust and so on, but nonetheless, as a challenge. The other one is explaining why is Switzerland a bit different from others. What's our role? We've always been honest broker. If the US and Iran, they don't have official diplomatic representation, so Switzerland is doing messenger between both countries. It's the case in other countries. And this is a specific role that Switzerland has.
Yes.
Because we're different. Yeah, this is part of DNA. We do strong, and it's coming back to the question of innovation, solution-oriented. We think we have to talk to everyone. Even if, agreeing or disagreeing is not the key point, but we strongly believe, and this is very Geneva DNA oriented, but we strongly need that people has to meet and that they have to talk together.
Right.
So in that sense, this is part of it. How do we explain that to people when you have a war in Europe?
Right.
Awesome. At the borders, but nonetheless, when you have the war in Ukraine, what is the role of Switzerland?
Yeah.
How do we position? How do we actively contribute to solutions?
Yes.
So it's not the same way than others.
Right.
This is also the second, I would say, if we talk about challenge, this is challenges.
Yeah.
This is one of them.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, this whole issue of neutrality, which has characterized Switzerland since 1815, right?
At least.
Or, as it's not that it's been thrown out the window, obviously, but it's now a little bit different from the way it was before Ukraine. And I can imagine there's a lot of traditional or conventional aspects of Switzerland that they're simply modernizing, right? They're evolving, and that must be a challenge for you and your colleagues, right?
Yeah, so first of all, there are two things in neutrality. You have the law and you have the neutrality policy.
Right.
There are two different things. The law is clearly defined.
Right.
And also you cannot, your neutrality has to be acknowledged by others.
Yes.
It's international conventions defining what is neutrality.
Right.
And you have some neutral countries giving up neutrality.
Right.
Happening in the north of Europe.
Right.
And then you have neutrality policy. How do you politically what do you make with neutrality? These are two different things. It's a topic, I would say, from a public diplomacy perspective, from our approach. So for not commenting on the political decisions in Switzerland that belong to politicians. Our job is not to tell them what to do.
Of
this
course
is
not.
their job.
Right.
Our job is to measure sometimes consequences of it.
Yeah.
And to explain what it is.
Yeah.
And if we take it, but neutrality is more an identity question in Switzerland. If you ask Swiss people, neutrality is it's an important topic.
Right. It's in the DNA here,
It's our DNA. But if you ask people, you might have different definitions of what is neutrality. If you ask Swiss people on the streets, they would all say, most of them would say it's important.
Right.
How do they understand? What do they...
Right.
The label things around neutrality might be different.
Right.
And there will be a votation about neutrality. So it's a national topic.
Right.
And we only active abroad. So our job is more abroad for people. If you take concretely about Ukraine, the neighbors country have been criticizing Switzerland for not exporting weapons or not allowing re-exportation of weapons that have been bought by others.
Right.
They don't really care if it's neutrality or not. They do care, can I re-export weapons? So neutrality, so if we explain it by neutrality or by anything else, is less relevant to them. What's important for them is if they can or not, or are they going to buy Swiss weapons or not? So the reasons why, it's more national, it's more domestic. It's a domestic question. For others, it's another one. So how do we explain to others why we're not giving weapons to Ukraine? And to say, we're doing a lot in Ukraine. Demining, Switzerland has a leader role in Ukraine, acknowledged by the Ukrainians themselves that Switzerland is doing a lot in Ukraine. We had in Bürgenstock last June peace conference about Ukraine. Of course, the result of the conference, but nobody was expecting peace after 2 days of conference. Switzerland is great, but not that. But the fact that you had all these countries meeting in Switzerland showed that they trust Switzerland. It's part of a process. History will tell. But nonetheless, so it means it's not that we're not doing anything for Ukraine. On the contrary, we're doing a lot. The SDC, so the Swiss Development and Cooperation Agency, is investing a lot. We're really doing things for Ukraine, which was a political decision. But indeed, we're not giving them weapons. But nonetheless, we say, okay, we're gonna. So Switzerland will chair OSCE next year. And it's an organization where you have many, many countries, including Russia. And the fact that we are Swiss means for OSCE, you have, everybody has to agree on the chairman. Switzerland has been decided in a very specific moment because the majority, if not everyone, I think it's everyone has to agree on the chairman. And in this particular moment, this is because we are Switzerland that we can have that position. And I think obviously it needs Switzerland to be in that position. So in that sense, we explain the challenge. We do explain that, of course, we have this neutrality question. And my job is not to hide it. It belongs to the Swiss people. So I'm not faking it. This is ready. Yes, indeed. Our neutrality has some consequences. And indeed, we're not exporting weapons. But that's, so we acknowledge, so we agree on that.
But there are other things.
But there are other things. We explain why. And then we give value to other things we do. And then at the end of the day, if people disagree, it can happen. Sometimes country can disagree. At least they should. Once I made a joke in a meeting, I say, hate us, but know why. I don't want
Really?
our mission is not for people to hate us, but in a complicated context, complex moment,
Right.
we can disagree, and we can deeply disagree with some other countries.
Right.
But our job is at least that people know why they do.
Mm-hmm.
So at least do not disagree with us for wrong reasons.
Right.
Based your disagreement on facts.
Right.
And there's a moment where what we can provide are facts.
Right.
It's okay. And then afterwards, if on certain topics
Yeah.
we disagree,
Yeah.
it's
It's
part of the
interesting.
game.
I mean, my take on that has always been that the people still have opinions,
Which is good.
Everyone here in Switzerland can take a stand on an issue like that, right? But the country itself has a role to play, and if it wants to play this role, it needs to be seen as impartial and open to this whole idea, coming back to a deliberate approach to getting people to talk to each other around the table. I mean, only Switzerland can do that, really.
Yeah, it belongs to the people too.
Yeah.
In the sense
Yeah.
that, again, it's interesting because if it was a pure marketing agency from private sector, I could tell the government, if you want to be loved, you should do that.
Oh, yeah.
But thanks God, this is not the case.
Right.
The decision belongs to the people,
Right.
which means to the parliament,
Right.
who's electing the
Right.
government, so the federal council.
Right.
And I wouldn't say we go with the flow, but our job is to explain, translate, package
Right.
decisions, sovereign decision from a country,
Right.
but it's very healthy. So first of all, it's a political decision.
Yeah.
And then we measure. So part of what we do when we measure our image abroad in the media and so
Right.
on, it means we make reports.
Yeah.
And say, okay, that decision of the government
Right.
has been covered by the media
Right.
abroad in
Right.
that way. Factual, negative, positive, and so on.
Right.
So we do inform,
Right.
but the job of a government is on the long run
Yes.
to keep in mind what the mission is, not to be people pleaser
Right.
and to react as soon as possible and to react to everything that is said by a foreign government and
Right.
so on. Switzerland, we're not slow. We just, again, we take time. And we know that if you react too quick, then what do you do with your decision? You need some overview, you need more meta approach.
Mm-hmm.
It's not negating nothing, but it's just like, especially nowadays where things are moving so quickly,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes if you run after each and everything, you're losing your point.
Right.
And this is why these people are elected.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, the government, its job is to preserve Swiss interests in the long run
Yes.
and to mirror the will of the people.
Yes. And it does it very, very well.
I say if you look at numbers, and of course maybe agree, disagree on some, but the fact is they're elected. We have a government where the 4 biggest parties are represented.
Yes.
We have a parliament representing with a federal state, so we have, again, that's interestingly, it's very similar to the US systems with the 2 chambers.
Mm-hmm.
And you have, for instance, the Council of State, you have Zurich having 2 elected Ständerate, and you have cantons 10 times or 15 times smaller,
Right.
having the same number of people. It's
Right.
the
That's
same
the
as the
Senate.
Senate in the US.
Yes.
And this is a very balanced approach. So it means the biggest cantons, like Vaud, Geneva, Basel, Zurich, gave up some of their power.
Yeah. Yeah.
When they defined in 1848 the new constitution
Right.
of the country. And we have the same constitution since 1848.
Right.
It's a stable one. And it takes compromise between the different parties. They have to find solution.
Right.
The government, they're meeting every Wednesday
Right.
or Friday during the parliamentary sessions. The 7 of them, they meet.
Yeah.
And they do their job.
Yeah.
And they do a job where, again, 4 parties.
Yeah.
So it's a very balanced
Sure.
things, and they have to agree
Yeah.
on what to do.
Yeah. It's
So
a
it's
brilliant
less
system.
It's less spectacular than some other ones.
Thank goodness.
But I must say, so when I say boring is the new sexy, I mean it. It
Right.
might appear boring because you don't have show off, and we don't have so many leaks, and you don't compare to the countries. There's Switzerland Tourism had a lovely campaign with Roger Federer and Robert De Niro a few years ago about there's no drama.
I remember that.
There are some. The pressure is there. Of course, the world is, it's shaking a bit at the moment.
Right.
But nonetheless, the appearance of boldness is maybe a key asset nowadays, when you have other countries having every 5 minutes new elements, communication, and so on, and each country is its own. So I'm not even just saying it's interesting to be Swiss.
Well, solid, steady, stable.
I mean, if you are willing to invest in a country, it might be useful to know that tomorrow government is still going to be there.
Yeah, right.
I mean, even if you look in Europe, some of countries are changing government, prime ministers, and so on.
Right.
And again, different stories. So really not. I mean, every country. I mean,
it's just,
most politicians are doing the best.
Right.
So
Sure.
in every country, it's not.
Sure.
We should also.
We would hope so.
Yeah, but I'm deeply convinced if they can or not. It's always a question. It's a complex mix. But indeed, in Switzerland, the checks and balances in Switzerland are very strong at the cantonal level and so on.
Right.
So it allows it to be what some people think is slower, but I would say more stable. And that stability is
about
key.
Dependability, right?
Yeah.
It's
about trust,
reliability, trust.
And you know that you're going to find, if you want to set up a company and you want to attract talents, quality of life, stability of it, security kind of thing, these are matters. These are relevant matters for people. And Switzerland has that kind of, quiet is not boring.
I think on that note, why don't we conclude? I really appreciate the chance we've had to talk to you today, Alexandre. And I mean, it's just a fantastic overview of all the different qualities that Switzerland brings to these kinds of relationships that would exist between the players in a business, but also the ecosystem, as you said, that would surround any company that would come here to set up. It's just an amazing place, and I've been here for a long, long time, and it never ceases to amaze me how solid the country is. And after talking to you, I now understand even more why it's the case. So thank you very much for spending some time with us. Really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.